So you can be profitable on paper, but still not have enough cash flow. And so we're going to break down here how long it takes your customers to pay, and then also add what's called aging buckets, which is essentially this right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get a list of all the months and then do the average number of days. And in this data set here, and if you want this data set, there's a link in the description to download it. And if you have the book, then there's a link in the book to download it as well. Or just shoot me an email. Just tell me what video this is. Okay, so what we need is we need to get the word January for this, right? And then the word February for this to start to do this. And I already did it here whenever I worked on the completed solution, but I'll show you the formula again. So equals text, and then go to the date, comma, and then it's going to be 4 M's for the full month. And then you can just double click that down. Okay, so we have that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to calculate the average days to collect. So if you have a payment date and an invoice date, you can just subtract them. But what you'll notice is down here at the bottom, you haven't received payment yet, so it's outstanding. So you don't want to have, like if if there's an error between subtracting these, we want it to be 0 because you don't want it to show 0 here. You want it to be a blank. And the reason you want it to be blank is because if it's 0, and let's just say, for example, 16, and you do the average of 16 plus 0, it's going to be the average of 8, right? 16 divided by 2. But you don't want it to say, okay, on average, we were getting paid in 8 days, because that's not true, because 1 is still, not being paid. And so the way you do that is you do if error, and then if error, and then you do the formula, which is this minus this. And then here you do a value if there's an error, and then it's this. But what we should do, I don't think it's going to work actually, because what we want to do, yeah, that's right. Because sometimes with blanks it gets a little bit weird. Because sometimes it would be like this minus this is just 0, but it's not. And so just drag, well, let me go back up a little bit. Where are we? So drag that down here, and now you have true blanks, so it'll do a proper average. Okay, so now we have those two things done, which is actually sort of the bulk of the editing of this data set. There's one more thing I'm going to show you when we get to buckets, which is a little bit confusing, but I'll explain it to you. Okay, so then just type in the word month, and I'll do it again. Type in the word month in cell B2. I mean, any cell really, but just somewhere. And then underneath that, type the word January. I'll just do it again. January, and then drag it down until you see December. Okay, so now we have that. So now what we want to do is we want to take the average of that column we just created. We want to take the average of this if the month is January. And so we're going to use a conditional formula called average if s. We're going to use if s. You can use average if as well, but I always use average if s. The difference between average if and average if s is average if s is a multiple criteria. Here we only have one criteria, right? The month of January, but maybe you have January and commercial or January and residential. And so that's going to be when you could use just the average if, but I always use the average if s because it also works for one criteria. Okay, so average of S, the first range is going to be, the first argument here is going to be the numbers. What are you wanting to take an average of? And so there. And then the next range is the criteria. So the first criteria, well, in this example, the only criteria is the month. So where is like the column of all the months? And it's going to be column J, comma, and then the actual criteria. So like right now it's going to be January. So cell B3. So the average days for January was 40 days to collect, and you can do, one decimal. And so there you go. Super straightforward to do. The reality is with all this stuff, the hardest thing is going to be getting structured data. And if you need some help with that, let me know. But once you structure it properly, then you're good to go. Okay, so now we want to just create this simple line chart. Super easy to do. The hard thing with charts is getting the data in a proper, structure to where you can create the chart. So you can just click anywhere in here. You can highlight. It doesn't really matter. And then just go to insert. And then you can click on the line here if you want. Or you can click on recommended charts. Maybe, you like this more or something. And so I'm just going to click the line chart and then just make it dark. And then, yeah, really straightforward on how to create this. I'll make this a little bit smaller, and then we're good to go. Also, just real quick, if you want to remove a decimal, like if you want this to be 45 instead of 45.0, just double click on it. And then you'll get this format axis on the right side. Click on the three little columns, go to number, and then make that a 0. And then you don't have that anymore. And if you want to see the values, you can just go to data labels. And the reason why you have the 0 here, and actually the same reason why you have the 0 on the axis, is because you have the 0 here. So if you want to keep it, that's fine. If you don't, then you can just click on this again and then do the same thing, go to number and then remove it. You'll actually have to change. You'll have to change it to a number and then go to 0 here if you want. But I'll keep it at 1. Just because, just so it's different. Okay, so the next thing, and this one's a little bit more challenging, is we need to create buckets, right? So we need to essentially create these buckets. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this over here, days to collect, put it down one, and then just say, invoice amount here, and then, yeah, whatever, count and percent total. I mean, set a time in a minute, I'll save a second. Okay, so we need to somehow tell Excel, okay, like if this here is 15 or less, we want it to say 0 to 15. If it's 16 to 30 days, we want it to say 16 to 30, like here. And there's a formula. It's an if-s function. It's not an if function. You can do it with if, but if-s is way cleaner. And I already did the formula here just to save time. And it looks confusing, I know, but it's not. And so the first argument is if there's a blank in column D, then just say it's outstanding. So if is blank, column D, then say outstanding, right? Because it means it hasn't been paid. And then this is sort of the confusing part, but it's not that bad. So it's just saying if the value of this is less than or equal to 15, do 0 to 15 days. If it's less than or equal to 30, then do 16 to 30 days. If it's less than or equal to 45, do 31 to 45 days, so on. And then if it's greater than 60, then do 60 plus days. And so you'll see like this part might be a little bit confusing because this is saying less than or equal to 60, do 46 to 60. So if the day was exactly 60, like which one would Excel choose? And because this isn't greater than or equal to. And the thing is, it goes in order. So it searches this first, and then it goes to this. And then because less than or equal to 30, it's like 12 days is less than or equal to 30, right? But because it's already in this bucket, it's not gonna choose the 12 days to say, I mean, essentially any of these, right? Because technically 12 is less than 60, it's less than 45, it's less than 30, but it's doing this first, and then it's doing this second, and then this third. And so that's the formula. If you want to pause to type it in, that's good. But that's how you do that. So then you can just double click, and then you can see we have everything sort of figured out. 63 days is, 60 plus, 47 days is 46 to 60. So it's all making sense. And then down here, you get outstanding. Because here it's saying 60 plus days. And so 60 plus days can be outstanding, which is fine. And so, okay, so I'm gonna actually redo it. I just paused the video and came back because it shouldn't be out. It should say outstanding, and the reason why is because it says is blank. But when we did that formula, like what happens? It's like a little glitch in Excel. It's not technically a glitch, but what's happening is like these cells are not truly blank. Like you can see, it's really small, but it's a 12 down here. It's because when you write the formula to be, if there's an error, make it blank. Even if you're using the quotations, it's not truly blank. I'll show you. It has this hidden character, right? And so yeah. But so what I'm gonna do, or what I did, is instead of having if is blank D3, because the formula is blank is like, is it truly blank? So that's not going to actually work in this scenario. But it's whenever I did it on the completed solution, I did it a different way to where I removed the hidden characters essentially. So if D3 equals blank, because if you remember the if error, we use those two quotations. So if D3 equals those two quotations or blank, then make it outstanding. And so now if you double click here, if you go all the way down, you can see now you have outstanding, which is what you want, because you don't want it to say 60 plus, because if you got paid on 65 days, on the 65th day, and you didn't get paid, you don't want it to be in the same bucket, right? You want it to say, hey, this hasn't been paid. Okay, so now what we do is we want to sum the invoice amount, and then we want to count, and then we want a percentage of the total on the count. And you can also do a percentage of the total on the paid, however you want to do it. And so the invoice amount is going to be in column E, and then you could also do it on payment amount if you want. I'll do it on invoice amount though. And so here we're going to use the SUMIFS. If you remember the average ifs, take the average if it's May. Here we want to do take the sum if it's 0 to 15 days. Take the sum if it's 16 to 30 days. So SUMIFS, so it's sort of the same argument here. So invoice amount, same argument, meaning first argument is the range, and then the second argument is the criteria range, and then the third is the actual criteria. So this is going to be the criteria range here, and then comma, and then we want right here in cell B18. And then you can press Control Shift and the number 4 to make it a dollar value. Okay, and just because I want to show you another formula, count ifs. So average ifs, take the average of something if this is January, right? If this is something else. SUMIFS, take the sum of, the invoice amount if days to collect is 0 to 15. And so now it's count ifs. So now we want just a row count. Like, in other words, how many times is 16 to 30 in this data set? And so it's the same thing. This one has one less argument because you're not summing. It's just criteria range, criteria. So it's just the criteria range. And then this is the criteria. And you can copy it and paste it down. And then you could do a percent of total. So you want equals this divided by the sum of these. And press the F4 key. Because as you drag it down, you don't want that red box to change. So let me show you what will happen if you don't hit the F4 key. It's like this is 6, so this is 80 divided by the sum of that. But if you copy it down, you can see how this red box went down 1. And the way around that is you want to lock this cell. So just hit F4 or put a $sign before the letter and before the number for each. And then you have that here. And then what I'll also do is I'll do the same on the invoice amount just to see how much of a difference it is. It looks like it's not, it's not much of a difference. So we can just use this, but it's probably better to use on the invoice amount because in the end, you really don't care how many accounts there are. You care about how much money you have, right? And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to create a simple chart like this. It's going to have 2 axes. One's going to be the revenue by the days, by the bucket, and then the other one, the red line, is going to be the percent of the total. Okay, so all you have to do is just highlight both of these and then press the Control key and then highlight the percent, go to Insert, Recommended, and it's the first one there. And then we'll just make it black. And then we can say, AR by days. And so, that's essentially how you do that. So if you have any questions on this stuff, just let me know. Again, if you want this file, it's going to be in the description, or just shoot me an email. Just tell me, hey, Ryan, can I get the AR days file? You can shoot me an email at questions@databoards.io. Let me just put that to the left a little bit. Well, okay. So anyways, that's all I got for this one. I'm going to be doing, well, I already have been doing, but there's going to be 160 videos at least, maybe 200 videos for HVAC. And so if you'd like to see them, there's going to be a bunch of them. Shoot me an email. I can get you on the list of our newsletter. And then also, if you're interested, if you have some questions about your own data, or, if you want some help, looking over your data, there's a form that you can just set up a time to chat in the description. And email me as well. Either one, whatever's easiest. But anyways, that's all I got for this one, and I will see you in future videos.